Hello, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up, the WNW 192 for Friday, May 29th, 2015. There are three big hotspots that could turn into war, regional or even global war in the world. Two of them you know about. One of them's kind of underreported. I'm going to start with the two you know about. Let's start with Ukraine. The U.S. continues to funnel material and intelligence and advisors into Ukraine and also Eastern Europe. Vice President Biden was out this week and said that he thinks that we ought to be giving lethal force to the Ukrainians. There's also drills with NATO and the U.S. That are military drills, also big air drill, Air Force drill, simultaneously, not part of separate. Russians are also doing military drills, including this past week as well, Air Force drills. That situation is not getting better. Not at all. I do not know what Kerry why it was so important for Kerry to fly to Sochi and meet with Vladimir Putin. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall, but whatever they talked about, it isn't getting any better. Not at all. Next thing, Middle East. Let's start with North Africa, which is in the Middle East, but North Africa, Libya is a huge mess. I guess you could call that one of Hillary Clinton's foreign policy accomplishments when she was Secretary of State. She completely destabilized Libya. It is now just a complete lawless state where terror groups are fighting each other for control. Way to go, Hillary. Move over to Egypt, and you have, the president there is a military dictator. He's partial to the U.S. and not very happy with any of the radical Islamic, people in Egypt. But that's a tenuous situation. And then go into Iraq and Syria, where ISIS is now headquartered. They have a large swath of land. They have their Islamic State. And if you look at what's been going on, it's been one defeat after another for Iraqi military forces. The latest, Ramadi, has fallen. Not that far from Iraq. And according to our military sources, that the Iraqi military was not, quote, driven out of Ramadi. Our military people say they drove out, as in on their own. They just left. Maybe this is why Ash Carter, the new Secretary of Defense, says that the Iraqis lack the will to fight. And I'm not sure that's true. There may be something way more there. They drove out of Ramadi and, we'll leave a few dozen tanks and some ammunition and bombs and Humvees, and they're all made by the U.S. There's a new poll out by Al Jazeera just this past week, and they asked Arab Muslims if they supported ISIS, if they sided with ISIS. And according to the Al Jazeera poll, 80% of Arab Muslims, that's Sunni Muslim, side with ISIS. 80%, according to a new Al Jazeera poll, of Sunni Muslims, Arab Muslims, side with ISIS. Now, you got to wonder if the Iraqi military forces that are Sunni are just saying, we're not going to fight ISIS. We like what they're doing. And then you have the Iranians who are supplying generals and know-how and I'm sure equipment and artillery to the situation, to the Iraqi army. And the Iraqi government is Shia, and the Iranians are Shia, Arab, Sunni, Persian, Shia. And maybe these people aren't very happy that their government has turned a Shia. And Shia and Sunni hate each other for hundreds of years. Now, the bombing campaign that President Obama has talked about is not serious. It's a disaster. It's an abject failure. Josh Earnest, the press secretary, came out and said, we're not going to, help the Iraqis do what they need to do for themselves. We're not going to do it with our men on the ground. We're going to train them, we're going to offer them supplies, and we're going to fly bombing missions. Well, that's a joke. I mean, sparse at best. I mean, they do a few missions, maybe a dozen, and if you talk to military sources, we are capable of doing 5, 6, 7, 800, 1,000 bombing missions a day. We're doing 2, 3, 5, a dozen. They're not serious. The Obama administration plan is not working. And they're going to double down on what's not working? Jim Sinclair has this old saying, it's too stupid to be stupid. And I wonder if this is too stupid to be stupid. The Saudis say that what President Obama is doing, said this months ago, they're just giving Iraq to Iran. Or are they trying to bait Iran into fighting ISIS and wear them down and get them to use their people and their material and their treasure and their expense to get the ISIS fighting Iran? Remember, they had a big war, Iraq-Iran war back in the 80s. For 8 years, they got Saddam Hussein to fight Iran, and it went on for 8 years, and neither side gained an inch of ground. Sure kept them busy for 8 years. I wonder if this is a replay of that. But make no mistake, the Obama administration plan to defeat ISIS is not working, and I am wondering if it is intended not to work. Now I think the big war probability, and maybe not right now, but a big war probability that I think will surely be coming down the tracks, and that is with China. Yes, folks, they're building islands out in international waters, would have always been recognized as international waters. China is building islands in the middle of the South China Sea, which is supposedly international waters. They're building islands with lighthouses and runways for military application. The Chinese say it's projection of their power. The Chinese say that. And the U.S. is flying these missions, surveillance missions, and sending ships in, and Ashton Carter says we're going to continue to do so. The Chinese say, well, by doing that, you are causing provocations and instigations, according to the Chinese, and they're telling us to leave, beat it. We'll do what we want to do. Can a military conflict be far off? What is their plan? This is a huge, well thought out plan. If you're building islands out in international water, some of them are in 300 feet of water. And they're building islands out there to build runways and lighthouses and military bases to project their power, according to the Chinese. That, to me, smacks of an inevitable war. Goldman Sachs is warning that the world is drowning in debt. Yes, Goldman Sachs is warning the world is drowning in debt. So much for the so-called recovery. They're also warning of a coming financial calamity that could be caused by a, quote, liquidity crisis or ballooning debt. And let me tell you, folks, the next time around will be far worse than 2008, and the reason why is the debt's gotten bigger. Yeah, they're right to warn. According to a new report, according to Goldman, multiple countries have debt to GDP ratios that's at or exceeds 100%. The USA is one of them, 105% of gross domestic product, debt to gross domestic product. And there's an old saying, an old rule, that when a country's gross domestic product is less than the country's debt, in other words, the debt is greater than what the country can produce, bad things happen. Like an economic implosion. And this isn't just one or two countries around the world that have a problem and a debt to GDP ratio, gross domestic product ratio, that exceeds 100%. Multiple countries, including the granddaddy, us, the U.S., the biggest economy supposedly. China, it depends on what the numbers are. But, the USA has a huge problem. And then you see stories out like this. We hear Goldman Sachs warning about an impending calamity, and worker optimism surges. This is in USA Today in the money section. Worker optimism surges. Well, I guess it does surge if you lie to them day after day, week after week, and say there's a so-called recovery when indeed there is not. Then you have a major bank like Goldman Sachs warning of a financial calamity. I talked to my friend Greg Manarino, and he says, I think the warning's real. I said, yeah, I think so too. And he says, here's why it's real. This is Manarino talking, and he says it's real because they don't want to miss this. They don't want to lose any more credibility than they already have. Remember back in 2008, all the banks were, subprime is going to be contained, everything's lovely, it's wonderful. There's no problem. Then boom, the whole economy tanks. We have this TARP and Congress emergency session, and phony accounting is instituted months later, and Federal Reserve starts QE1 and QE2 and Operation Twist and QE3, and I'm sure QE4 if they haven't already covertly done that already. But all this money printing, QE, they call it quantitative easing, money printing, tons of it. to try to paper over this. Of course, none of the bankers get fired and nobody goes bankrupt except for a few people like, Lehman Brothers and I don't know, Wachovia Bank. AIG was saved with massive amount of government help because they were reckless. But I digress. Goldman Sachs is warning of financial calamity. And it will be bigger because the debt's bigger than 2008. The derivative position is way bigger. It was 600-700 trillion, and now it's a quadrillion, according to the Bank of International Settlement. The official number, 1,000 trillion. Some people say the derivatives, which is a completely dark, unregulated a pool of debt bets, is 2.5 times that. But just the official number, a quadrillion, 1,000 trillion. And it's just, any number of things can touch this off. War in any of the places I talked to about, Ukraine, Middle East, North Africa, South China Sea. A bank in the middle of Europe, and not that big of a bank, could go under and cause a daisy chain of default because everything's interconnected and leveraged up to the hilt. According to Goldman Sachs, the world is drowning in debt. They're worried about ballooning debt. And I have said many times, we've been told that that debt is money, Federal Reserve notes, and that debt, bonds, is an asset. Debt's money, and debt is an asset. No, we're going to find out neither one of those is true. Debt is always a liability, and there are hundreds of trillions of dollars of liabilities sloshing around the globe. This does not end well, folks. And remember last week I talked to you about how they're propping this up, and it's in the newspaper. Bankers are admitting to criminal activity. They've been fined for criminal activity, rigging the currency markets, Forex, rigging the LIBOR market, London Interbank Offered Rate, the interest rate market, which rigs the housing market, which rigs the stock market. They rig the gold market. They rig the silver market. They rig everything. And they are paying, they're admitting to it and paying fines. And, JP Morgan is now a criminal. The bank is a criminal. Not anybody in the bank, but they're a criminal. And yet we have stories like this. And I know you guys will breathe easy after you see this, and you can have a nice weekend. Here we go. Global soccer corruption case has roots in U.S. Let's just instead of global, let's say banker. Let's say banker instead of global soccer. Instead of soccer, let's say banker. Global banker corruption has roots in U.S. That'd be true. And then here we go. Let's just change the name of soccer officials. Let's call them banking officials. Abused their positions of trust to acquire millions of dollars in bribes and kickbacks. And let's just go over here to Loretta Lynch, the new Attorney General, who says, this is racketeering and organized crime and money laundering. And that's right. But it's soccer. Global soccer corruption has roots in U.S. We can all sleep now. I'm glad they got a lid on that global soccer corruption, and not the corruption of the bankers that's cost the world hundreds of trillions of dollars of their ripoff and fraud and incompetence and malfeasance. But the global soccer corruption, boy, she's on that. It's unbelievable, folks. Really. It's frightening. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments. I got some of the smartest people on the web on USA Watchdog commenting on USA Watchdog. Thank you for your donations. That helps us out. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm Greg Hunter. That's the way I see it. And remember, fear not. Prepare yourself physically, mentally, and above all, spiritually. Fear not.